I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with 4 incredible experts. And I have to start with you, Gary. How does it feel being the minority in this group?
You know, it's funny. I didn't realize it until I walked into the room, and I was trying to find the group that I was going to be talking to. And I went to the first group of women. It turns out it was nobody here, and it was a wake-up call as a man. You're not used to this experience, so I'm enjoying it so far.
Okay, fantastic. So why don't you start? Tell me who you are, what you do, and why don't we start with what do you think the greatest trend in this 4th generation, in this 4th industrial revolution is?
Okay. Great. Do you want me to start?
We're going to start with Gary since we already unplugged with him.
Sure. I'm happy to go first. I may answer your question a little bit orthogonally, if that's all right, because I think one of the biggest trends that people have been talking about is this massive displacement of jobs. And it's certainly, particularly if you combine AI, IoT, automation, we're going to lose jobs. What are we going to do with all these unemployed people, et cetera? And our McKinsey Global Institute has done a fair bit of work against this. And what they've come up with, and there's a lot of underlying math that gets you there, is somewhere by 2030, we are going to lose about 15% of the jobs globally that exist currently right now. And that's about 400 million people. But they're going to be replaced by somewhere between 550 million and 900 million new jobs. The problem isn't the net job loss, it's actually a net job gain. The problem is upskilling, reskilling, new skilling all of the people that are coming into the workforce or already in the workforce to be able to do those new jobs. And I think that's probably part of what we'll talk about a bit today.
Well, good. We're looking forward to that because I think we sometimes make this, it seems daunting and that there's so much to do, but we do need to break it down into steps and step change so that we can truly make progress. Karl, will you just tell us who you are, what you do, and what trends you're really pretty excited about?
Yeah, my name is Karl. I'm in AI and robotics for about the past 20 years. I was called the mother of robots in the sense that I've done a variety of different applications of robotics. My last venture was a self-driving car startup called Drive.ai out in Silicon Valley. I'm most excited about the trend of just AI becoming the new electricity and being so pervasive in every industry, and it's hard-pressed to find one that it doesn't work. So I really like the application of AI going into what is considered unsexy areas like trucking and agriculture. So I think it's going to pervade every single field.
Fantastic. Deborah, what about you?
Yeah, I'm Deborah Quazzo, and I'm the managing partner of a venture capital fund focused on education and workforce technology investment. And I've been doing this for about 21 years, back when education technology and workforce technology were not sexy. They seem to have become sexy recently. And it actually fits into Gary's orthogonal comment, which we'll come back to. And I also am the co-host and co-founder of an event called the ASU GSV Summit, which happens every once a year, typically in April, which sort of celebrates innovation across this, what we like to call the pre-K to gray spectrum of learning and talent innovation. And I am actually picking up here is on the whole requirement that we're going to have across our global economies for reskilling, upskilling, learning in general, because actually the skills deficits are not only being propelled by changes in job requirements, but they're actually being propelled by failures of educational systems early on. So skills deficits really start in early childhood education. So I think I'm excited about a lot of innovation happening there. But we actually are looking at a concept we believe in that AI is in machine learning are impacting very seriously, which we refer to as autonomous learning, and the creation of weapons of mass instruction. Heretofore in the education industry, there had never been companies that could actually address millions of learners. Today, Coursera, which is a company we're fortunate to invest in, has 40 million learners on its platform. So this is a sea change from the way that education was delivered historically, with something we're really excited about.
That's amazing. Karin.
Hi. So I'm Karin Klein. I'm a founding partner of Bloomberg Beta. We invest in the future of work, and we're backed by Bloomberg. And when we launched the funds about 6 years ago, I think we were the first to raise our hand and say that we're going to focus on AI because we saw the impact it would have on the future of work and the potential importance of it. Before that, I worked at SoftBank, and before that, I worked with Mike Milken doing his education and media and got my start doing education. And so for a long time, I've cared about education and AI, and I think we all hear something that we're pretty excited about is we all hear AI and big data as being important, and we think the little known hero is the model. And it's not just the model that everyone thinks of related to spreadsheets. It's really the ability to take a range of inputs and start to predict outcomes. And so for those of you in the room that have quants, ask them to tell you more about machine learning models, because we think model-driven businesses, things like Netflix and Amazon, are going to be the true winners in the new economy.
Well, that's really amazing. Okay, so let's go to the future of work. And let's tie in the future of the workforce as a result of that. And we've been talking about upskilling and reskilling and all of those things. What jobs, when we talk about the fear that we're going to be cutting out a lot of humans from jobs versus now replacing them with new ones, and your
Orthogonal. It's a great word.
I can't spell it.
Go
I
look
can't
it up.
even say it. It's a tongue twister. So let's talk about that. And this is just open for conversation. One of the things that is so important for us is it's not in a textbook. It is about conversations that we're going to have. Sometimes they're hard conversations, but making it simple. What are some of the challenges that we're going to have? What are some of the jobs that we're going to be replacing? And how are we going to be upskilling for these new ones? And what about the people currently in the workplace today? How are we training them as well as the generations to come? Gary.
I can start a little with it, just the nature of the jobs. The retraining thing is a big challenge, and I've got a couple thoughts on it, but I think there's others here that have probably a clearer point of view. The jobs in the end are going to divide into what we'll call hard skills and soft skills, and I'm using kind of funny language for it, but hard being anything that involves coding, anything that involves what we'd think of as more STEM related, and soft skills being anything that involves cognitive interaction, anything that involves emotional interaction, anything that involves relationships. And what we've actually started to see some companies do is break apart the jobs that they've got right now by whether or not there are hard skill requirements or soft skill requirements, recognizing a lot of jobs actually need both. So for us, for example, we've got people doing really deep machine learning, all the algorithms, the coding, et cetera. And then we have a group of people we call translators. So they know just enough about that, although they're not doing the coding themselves, but they've got expertise in a particular area, be it automotive or be it marketing. And they can then apply the work that's being done by the algorithmic team. So it's one example of where you see the soft skill and the hard skill marrying together, where historically either we tried to jumble that all in the same person, or we just didn't recognize that they were different enough that you could actually train for them differently.
When you talk about translation, is that contextualization of hard skills?
That's exactly it, yeah.
And when you think about hard skills and soft skills, how do you identify soft skills or recruit for soft skills?
I can tell you what we do, because historically that was most of what we did, and then we used grades to recruit for hard skills, what sort of grades people had in their quantitative classes. We actually now do some of these socio-demographic testing. So we're experimenting with a lot of different stuff. We're actually experimenting with video games as one way to see how people respond in the instance. We're also doing teams where there's a level of team interviewing. They're not being asked a question, they're being asked to work on something together as a team, and we're actually totally uninterested in the outcome. We watch the interactions to see how the soft skills work. And then some of it is classic interviewing of give us an option, give us an example of when you faced a leadership challenge or when you faced a situation where people didn't want to do what you wanted them to do. How did you go about it? I think we're actually pretty good at measuring the soft stuff through normal interviewing. What we're trying to do is get better at measuring the soft stuff through some quantitative work to actually really be able to quantify how good somebody is and how learnable it is.
And one of the reasons I'm smiling is because, and Deborah probably sees this with the inbound, there's a lot of people trying to use AI to get incremental benefits around recruiting. And so
Yes.
I do see
Everybody.
it being an area where the machines are trying to come in and give us better data on people. And this is a perfect example why I think there's still the integral part of humans being involved. Is there's so much you just pick up from a one-to-one conversation that you need to have. And second part, which ties also to the importance of people, is reference checking. Like, it's not something that should be done in an automated fashion. It's something that actually has to be done systematically, but that's where you get the real benefit of, can somebody have the right skills to adapt?
Yeah. And I want to just jump in and just say that I think where we are with AI today is that it automates tasks and not jobs. And
Very
so,
good.
I mean, the general rule of thumb is if a task can be automated in under a second, that's where narrow AI is right now. We have not achieved general AI, which is what you see with the Terminator. So it's very, very narrow, very, very specific, and it's almost like a multiple choice decision that it has to make. So that's currently where we're at. And most tasks and most jobs are a complicated series of things. So at this point in time, there are certain steps of your job that can get automated. And I myself am very excited to offload some of those menial, boring tasks so I can focus on more high-level strategic work.
Yeah, we have a founder who essentially looked at her entire workflow and figured out what aspects of her job she could automate. And Quartz did some research or did an article about a year ago, or last year, about how developers were getting fired for automating their jobs. And I actually think that's totally the wrong thinking, that we should be looking for ways to automate the dull, the dangerous, and the dirty types of jobs and figure out where we can think about unleashing human creativity so they don't have to do them in mundane stuff.
Well, I think another kind of interesting aspect of this whole soft skills, hard skills thing is the middle level and lower middle level workers, which is really where the numbers are, right? That we're and where the skills deficits are for CEOs, and how do we train? We're seeing some really interesting. We like. There's the president of Western Governors University calls them power skills, which I think is bad. That soft skills thing is really hard title.
Right.
It always has been. So I do think it's a power skill issue. These skills are critically important, and interestingly, I mean, our higher education institutions are completely ill-equipped to teach those fundamental power skills. And so we're seeing some really interesting innovation on the venture side of our business from entrepreneurs who are designing a digital curriculum to be delivered to middle and lower skill workers around power skills, soft skills. And I think that as we think about how, and that's actually creating new job opportunities back to, and the platforms are going to be deeply embedded with AI and machine learning to automate them in all kinds of ways to make it make more efficient delivery and to help the faculty member who's teaching. But there's a lot of fascinating dynamics going on here around how we make people, the vast majority of people, better equipped to go to work and better equipped to align with skills that CEOs are looking for and can't find.
But can we not find them because we don't know how to identify them? You know, you need to know what you're looking for, and we're talking about the future of work, the future of the workforce, and also when does education start and how are we educating? So what are we doing in that area with education? What are we training for?
Well, I think one of the issues but just to finish the point, only a third of our population has a college degree, right, a four-year degree, and jobs increasingly are going to require for some kind of, it may not be a degree, a certificate, but some form of post-secondary education. So, in fact, a lot of people don't have, I mean, you can't find it because they weren't, they didn't go through an educational system that was able to put through those skills and have those employees develop those kinds of skills that are required. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think we do a bad job of finding, there are all kinds of talent hidden in plain sight. You can go into all kinds of populations that have talent hidden in plain sight, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's incarcerated there are all kinds of populations that have talent hidden in plain sight. But I think there's a huge chunk of our population that's simply not equipped today based on the lack of an academic system to actually address these issues. And I think entrepreneurs are actually, I think, very optimistically, working really hard to solve that.
And I think that it's not only the early education where we're going to see a lot of innovation, it's also the lifelong learning that many of us think about investing in, and even focusing on, everyone should be thinking about for our own careers, is how do we continue to develop? I mean, the exciting thing about technology is that there is change, but it also means that we have to keep pace with it.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I think I agree with the lifelong learning. I think this AI revolution will happen much faster than we think, and so we need to democratize education, which I think it's really powerful to have online tools, because college really prepares you for 4 years, and you're supposed to learn skills on the job. But most jobs did not exist while we were in college, and I think that these online courses and MOOCs are a very economical way to educate the public on new skills as they develop so quickly.
Now, I'll add one more to that, Shelley, which is I do think there's going to be a responsibility on the part of corporations to reskill their own employees. And you can debate how much of that is just responsibility to society, or it's a smarter thing to do than to go out and fire a bunch of people and hire up a whole bunch of new people. And you're starting to see that. We have one telecom client that has spent, at this point, $250 million and counting.
AT&T.
I wasn't going to say, but a well-known telecom company, and it has been around both the training that they're providing, but also actually paying for people then to go back to local community college. They've identified the skills they need. People can then badge to be certified to be able to learn that they've learned those skills, and then that qualifies them for a new job. And they're essentially funding this as long as the individuals are putting the time in.
So
and I think you're going to see a lot more of that.
So let's go there, because you're talking about reskilling your current workforce, which is great. This is the first time in history we have 5 generations in the workplace, Gen Z coming in, and traditionalists moving out but retiring later. What generation is open and willing and capable of learning new skills? Are you looking at your millennial generation, and that's the one that you're, reskilling, or do you feel someone like me at 57 is still capable of learning some of these new tricks?
You are still capable, and I think we need to find a way to make education engaging enough that people, regardless of their age, want to keep learning. So,
thank you.
yes.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
Hey, I want to go to your reskilling school.
I think it's one of those things that if anyone in the audience finds, I'm personally very interested. I don't think there have historically been massive retraining efforts that have succeeded. So I'm personally focused on trying to find opportunities, at least in micro communities, doing that and seeing if there's ways to, build and scale those types of approaches.
Yeah, because it's a real interesting problem for different parts of the population. My kids are millennials and one Gen Z, and they got great educations in engineering and all that sort of stuff, but they are already having to retrain and redo, and which is fantastic. And I'm 58, and so I think I'm taking the hall pass. I'm not taking another test.
I'm going with you wherever we're going.
I'm done with having to take tests. So, but the other part of the equation is the people, our age who are going to need to be working into their 60s. Which does include me, so maybe I'll have to take a test. But who are stuck and are going to have to retrain, and we're going to have to find solutions, and they can. I mean, I think part of the beauty of AI as it gets better, 'cause it's not there yet. Adaptive learning has been a huge struggle, and another company bit the dust this week, acquired by the public company Reiley, who had put hundreds of millions of dollars into trying to develop an underlying MLAI platform for adaptive learning. It's very hard to get good. It will get good over time, and at which point we'll be able to do very personalized delivery of learning for all ages. Yeah. And I think it's going to be important because it's going to be the only way you maintain relevance in the workforce.
Karl, I want to go back to you with some things that you identified, especially with robotics, and we are missing diversity in STEM today, or in STEAM, or in all of these technology fields. And I heard that even with scanning face images, if you don't have diversity working on it, it couldn't originally identify even dark color skin. What kind of work are you doing in this area, and how do we get more diversity into the mix so that we can make sure we don't just have, half of the code brain, working for us in the healthcare arena?
Yeah, it's a really important topic that's come up in terms of building diverse teams. We know that economically it makes sense. It's getting a lot of, it's a loud mouthpiece that a lot of people use to build teams. But we've seen it shows over and over that diverse teams are stronger. You find your blind spots earlier, and you build better products. But I will say it's a challenging problem. It is hard. No one has a silver bullet. It is a constant struggle, especially in tech, where the numbers are under 15% of groups are women. And I think, when I think about diversity, I think about not just gender, which is the most obvious when you see like the 50-50 split, but you have different ages, different types of schooling, different social economic class, and some of these more abstract things all the way down to introverts versus extroverts. So, it is hard to capture what a diverse team means, but I do think that it comes from the top. It will come from your CEO. I think some companies have talked about hiring and almost outsourcing like a chief diversity officer. I personally don't think that works. You need to be responsible, and it has to come from the DNA of the leadership team. And like a chief diversity officer, speaking it and advocating for it does not help. So that's what I believe. That it has to come from the top. It has to come from the culture of a company.
So Gary, you are doing so much work in this area at McKinsey, and I think the stats are it's less than 13.5% of machine learning is female, and McKinsey is definitely profiling and doing a lot of research in this area. What are you finding?
Well, I'd love to give you a positive story, but I'm not. We're not finding it yet. I will maybe offer a couple bright spots, but generally speaking, if you just leave aside tech for a moment and look at women getting into the C-suite, and we've done some work around diversity too, but specifically now, women getting into the C-suite. On our current trajectory, somewhere in 105 or 110 years, we'll have gender parity in the C-suite. So you can decide if that's acceptable or not, but that's about where the trend.
What generation will we be in then?
It
We're
won't be
starting
this,
out.
it
I think
won't
I'll
be this
be done.
generation.
I'll definitely be done. My hall pass will be set at that point. Yeah.
So that's the natural trajectory. The bad news is tech looks even worse. And tech looks worse for a variety of different reasons. It looks worse because there's less women in engineering and other STEM programs from the get-go, which is different than college graduation, which is actually aired slightly on the side of women. I think it's 52-48 or something like that. So there's less women in the technical fields to begin with. The percentage getting hired as a percent of people in the particular companies is actually lower. So people, notwithstanding the fact that there's even a smaller pool to choose from, people are choosing a smaller percentage of that pool for the hiring for the jobs that people most want, and then the attrition rates are higher because the company cultures aren't working well for people. So the whole pipeline isn't working, and I think corporations are going to have to solve that from the beginning, and you're starting to see it with people funding Girls Who Code, right, which is now focused on high school. So you're starting to see, and at our high school, they have a whole separate program to encourage I was about to call them women, but they're really girls, the girls to be going into STEM. And so it's going to start there. That's going to take a while for the beast to move through the python. And then in the corporations themselves, some of the research we've done says the biggest mistake you can make is to sort of peanut butter women or any type of diversity across multiple, one woman per department, one woman per team, one woman per in the C-suite, et cetera, because then you're suddenly the representative of your generation and your gender. And it is actually, even if you end up with whole departments without any women, it is better to have at least a few women in a department, a few women on a team, such that you're actually then, they're just part of the team. They're not representing anything, they're just part of the team. And so there's a few things like that we're starting to see. To your point, Carol, that you can't also say the women are responsible for taking care of the women. The numbers just don't work. And so we have a whole bunch of mentorship and sponsorship programs at McKinsey. We make all the partners responsible for them. And then the last is you have to be very careful of keeping a common bar for whatever it is, be it to promotion, in our case it's to election. So the bar can't move. If anybody perceives the bar's moved, then you have a situation where they say, well, they only got that because they were a woman. They only got that because they were diverse. So the bar's got to stay constant. But what you can do is to provide extra help for people, be it training, be it mentorship, be it the extra dinner that you might take or the extra conversation to help somebody so that they get over the bar. So you keep a constant level of excellence, but you actually disproportionately help some people in order just to start, to make that trend so that it's not 100 years from now.
I was just going to say something. I was recently back at Wharton, and there was a researcher from Google, and she said, when we're talking about the bar, when the bar for just women to get to that bar, there's so much more that goes on when you think about family responsibilities and even elder care as well as child care. And so I think we're just being very cognizant when we're setting the bar of all the different things that people are doing and valuing it. And then regarding, I am encouraged about the future because we're at least having this conversation. And Deborah and I sit on the board of Harvey Mudd College, and we see firsthand how exceptional the engineering students are, and over 50% of them that are graduating are women. So to Gary's point, I think as long as we can keep them in the pipeline, then they'll be big contributors, and we'll be able to change some of that.
And it's interesting, because it also is very, I realize there are other countries with deeper issues, but it is very American. It's interesting. I was doing a podcast with the chief talent officer at UiPath, and UiPath is the fastest growing enterprise software company in the history of mankind, although enterprise software is not that long of a history. But it is an extraordinary robotic process automation company. It's founded in Estonia. And when I was interviewing the chief talent officer, they are 50-50 men, women. And it is a it is the highest of the high-tech businesses. And, I said, Mary, I said, how in the world is a company of your ilk, given all the issues we have here, 50-50 men, women? And he said, one of the few benefits of being a formerly communist country is that there was equity. And so when I grew up, I saw my mother ran an engineering department in a big, important company. So literally, UiPath has begun it's now New York, and they're now in over 30 countries, all of which they've kept the gender balance in their hiring. So it just tells you, we get it in our heads that it is more than doable, because UiPath was only founded about 4 years ago. So, it's an interesting example.
And the economics are there, which is also really exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that there's no excuse. People understand. McKinsey did some research that said something like 95% higher return on equity for companies that had diverse boards. Yeah. And it's just like, when you see the economics are there, we have no excuse for not trying to have a reason to make the difference.
Well, I also think, if you can see her, you could be her, and look at all of you up here.
And you.
And me, I'll go in that category. But let's go also to countries. How's the U.S. doing in this area? And are there countries doing a better job? And if so, how are they leading the way?
Well, I'll just comment on China. Since I spent all my time in the education and workforce space, education in particular in this case, and we spend a huge amount of time in China, and many of our partners are China-based because they put education first. It is what gets all the dollars. Parental spend on education outside the classroom in China eclipses the U.S. by something like 5 times. Last year, 2.5 times the venture and growth equity dollars flew into Chinese education technology companies, then flew into U.S. education technology companies, and they're willing to be very, very aggressive with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the application of that to students, young students. They are very comfortable with the concept. And I'm not sure I agree with this concept, but they're very comfortable with the concept of AI becoming the teacher. There's actually a public company at this point out of China called LAIX is the ticker. Liliushu is the Chinese name, and they are called the first AI teacher. It's an English language learning platform founded by a Princeton PhD, now based in Beijing, or actually Shanghai. But China, I think, is moving so quickly far ahead of the U.S. They have absolutely, in this area of education, innovation, and technology, have moved rapidly ahead of us, and are doing things at a much faster clip and taking much bigger risks for learning outcomes in their population. And we have one partner who, in the fourth quarter of last year, spun up a 100-person AI lab in Beijing in 3 months, and you couldn't do that in the U.S. So it's impressive and really daunting.
That's amazing. So we just have a couple of minutes left. Let's just go down, and we'll start with Karl. What is your greatest hope for machine learning and everything that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now we're on stage speaking into electric microphones with electric lights, and during break we're going to go get coffee made by an electrical coffee maker. And what I would want for the future of machine learning is actually that it's so pervasive that we no longer need the word AI in front of something, that your AI self-driving car will just be a car because there was no time prior to this that why wouldn't your car drive itself, so that you no longer need that preface of saying AI or machine learning in front of something. I have
a... comfortable today going in a self-driving car, just out of curiosity?
No.
I have a self-driving car company. I fully believe in that AI is a much better driver than I am. It's 360 degrees cognizant all the time. It's never on its cell phone. So yes, I fully believe that will be the future. It's inevitable that it will come. I have a 3-month-old daughter, and she will grow up in a time where she won't know a world that doesn't have AI. So I think, for me also, AI is tackling some of the biggest cultural problems today and political problems, like climate change and transportation and wealth inequality. So I hope that the decisions of our collective leaders today of new companies really think about the impact that we want to make for future generations and the ethical issues that pervade throughout that as well.
Thank you. Gary, what about you?
Well, so I've got a combination of both, in addition of what I'll call the mundane, which is lots of businesses solving lots of problems, ones that some of which we can't even predict, to either reduce cost or increase the effectiveness of what they do. When you aggregate it all together, it's an incredible new world. And I do believe much of AI is going to get brought to us by the efforts of individual businesses, not selling AI, but what they actually do. But then I also think there are a set of things, and you touched on some of them with climate change and others, where we have these intractable problems that are too complicated for us to get our head around them with the current technologies. And hopefully, AI actually allows us to crack some of these really difficult diseases, weather patterns and weather change. And you could pick a whole set of things where we just don't have the tools to crack them now, and this may allow us to do so.
Fantastic, Deborah.
Yeah, and I'd say quickly that I do believe I care a lot about the issues of income inequality, and I do believe the underpinnings of income inequality are educational inequality, and now increasingly that leads on to skills inequality. And I do believe, we're not going to solve this in a traditional broadcast, non-personalized manner. It's just not. We're not going to be able to address the sheer numbers that we're going to have to address to fix this. And so I'm very hopeful that AI is going to mature in a way that it's going to allow for us to apply it to education and begin to get at the income inequality issues.
Karen.
I'd love to see that. So I love all the comments that have been by my esteemed colleagues here. I also hope that nobody will have to do a mundane job that makes them miserable. I'd love to see that happen. Everyone having jobs we love.
Well, that's amazing. I would say when you love what you do, it's called passion. When you don't, it's called stress. So here is to 4 incredible, passionate, innovative thinkers that are not afraid of opening up these conversations and, most importantly, creating solutions for change. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you for your time.